They need to just stop talking about stuff in the Odyssey. Who's excited for this?
A trailer drops. Within 48 hours, it's sitting at 400,000 dislikes. The comment section is a war zone. Every entertainment outlet writes the same headline, "Is this the next big flop?" And yet 3 weeks later, that exact movie opens to $180 million and becomes the biggest hit of the summer. We've all watched this cycle play out enough times to ask the obvious question, is the dislike ratio actually telling us anything? Or is it just the loudest 10% of the internet mistaking themselves for the box office? Today we're stress testing that theory against the one movie built to break it, Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, out July 17th. A film currently sitting on a brutal trailer ratio and, according to every tracking service that matters, one of the biggest openings of Nolan's career. If you want more of this, box office breakdowns, casting news, the stuff the trades won't say plainly, hit subscribe now, because we're about to get into exactly why the loudest reaction on YouTube and the actual box office result keep landing on opposite ends of the map. Here's the theory, and you've heard some version of it 100 times. A trailer gets ratioed, the fan base revolts, the discourse spirals for weeks, and the movie tanks. Rings of Power lost a huge chunk of its audience between seasons. The Marvels, despite following a billion-dollar predecessor, posted the worst opening weekend in MCU history. Snow White limped to a quiet, underwhelming domestic run after 2 years of pre-release controversy. Borderlands, Madam Web. The list of Backlash predicted the flop examples is long enough that it feels like a law of nature. So when a trailer gets ratioed, everyone reaches for the same conclusion. This one's cooked too. The problem is survivorship bias. We remember every case where the backlash and the flop lined up, because that's a satisfying story. The internet called it, "The suits didn't listen, chaos ensued." What we conveniently forget are all the times a trailer got buried in dislikes and the movie went on to make $1 billion anyway. Barbie's marketing was mocked relentlessly before release. This looks like a fever dream. Who asked for this? And it became the highest-grossing film of 2023. Sonic the Hedgehog's original character design was so despised online that the studio delayed the entire movie to redo the animation, and the franchise it eventually built is now worth well over $500 million combined. Even Deadpool's marketing drew skepticism from people convinced an R-rated superhero movie couldn't work commercially. It became one of the most profitable comic book films ever made. The pattern isn't backlash equals flop. The pattern is that backlash is loud, and loud is easy to mistake for large. What actually decides whether a movie flops is a completely different set of variables, and today we're going to walk through what those variables are, using The Odyssey as the live test case, because it currently checks almost every box on both sides of the argument at once. Before we go further, if you're new here, this channel breaks down box office tracking, casting decisions, and industry trends without the spin you get from the studios or the outrage bait you get from half of YouTube. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you catch the follow-up once this movie actually opens, because we're going to hold ourselves accountable to this prediction. Let's be precise about what a trailer dislike ratio measures, because it's not what most people assume. A dislike count measures the intensity of reaction from people who were already engaged enough to click on a trailer and then click a button. It says nothing about the size of the audience who will actually buy a ticket, and it says nothing about the people who never saw the trailer at all, which, for a film this size, is most of the eventual audience. Global marketing campaigns reach people through TV spots, billboards, trailers attached to other films in theaters, social clips, and word of mouth. YouTube's comment section is a specific demographic: extremely online, disproportionately male, disproportionately vocal about casting and franchise fidelity, and, this is the important part, disproportionately likely to have already decided how they feel about a director or a franchise before the trailer even played. That's not a dismissal of the backlash. Some of it reflects real audience fatigue with a franchise, and that fatigue absolutely can show up at the box office. Rings of Power's subscriber engagement genuinely did decline between seasons. And that's a real signal because it's measuring the same repeat audience over time. But a single trailer's dislike ratio on a new film, for a director with a built-in mainstream audience that doesn't necessarily live in YouTube comment sections, that's a much weaker signal, because the people doing the disliking and the people buying tickets in week one are often not the same population. This is where The Odyssey gets genuinely interesting as a test case, because it has both kinds of signal happening at once, and they're pointing in opposite directions. On one side, the film has drawn real, sustained online criticism. Casting choices, particularly Lupita Nyong'o as Helen of Troy, sparked a debate that's been going for months about how closely an adaptation should hew to a character's physical description in the source poem versus prioritizing performance. That's a legitimate creative and cultural conversation, and it's generated a lot of heat, a lot of clicks, and a lot of dislikes on the trailers. On the other side, every box office tracking service watching this film is projecting something close to a career-best Nolan opening. Deadline's tracking puts the domestic opening between $80 and $100 million, with some outlets suggesting the ceiling could run even higher. Box Office Pro's long-range forecast has it beating Oppenheimer's opening weekend outright. Tracking data reportedly shows The Odyssey's first-choice numbers among male audiences over 25, slightly ahead of where Oppenheimer was at the same point before release, and its overall interest tied with Project Hail Mary, one of the biggest openers of the year. IMAX 70mm screenings, the hardest ticket in the format, reportedly sold out in major cities nearly a year before release. That's not a movie that's about to become the next Marvels. That's a movie tracking to open bigger than a film that made $330 million and swept the Oscars. So how do you reconcile a trailer getting hammered with dislikes and a tracking department telling you this is shaping up to be one of the biggest openings of the year? You reconcile it by recognizing these are two different audiences answering two different questions. The dislike ratio measures how does the extremely online casting-focused crowd feel about this specific choice. The tracking numbers measure how many people who buy movie tickets say they intend to see this movie. For a Christopher Nolan film specifically, those two crowds barely overlap. Nolan's core audience is built on IMAX loyalty, on event movie behavior, on a 15-year track record of delivering. That audience shows up regardless of what a trailer's comment section looks like. Now, to be fair to the theory, there are cases where the trailer backlash and the box office outcome lined up, and it's worth understanding why those cases were different from what's happening here. The Marvels is the clearest example. It wasn't just that the trailer got a rough reception. It was that the reception echoed a specific, already documented problem. Audiences had cooled significantly on the character following her first solo film, and Marvel was releasing this one sandwiched between two of the most anticipated sequels of the year, which meant even a lukewarm response was going to get crushed by scheduling. The trailer backlash wasn't the cause of the flop. It was an early symptom of a franchise fatigue problem that was going to show up at the box office, regardless of what the trailer looked like. Snow White is a similar story, but the backlash there ran for nearly 2 years, not 2 weeks, and it was compounded by off-screen controversy, involving comments the lead actress made about the source material, and, separately, comments about a political conflict that alienated a chunk of the potential audience well before release. That's not a trailer dislike ratio, that's a sustained, multi-front erosion of goodwill over a long runway, which is a fundamentally different and much stronger signal than a spike of dislikes in the days after one trailer drops. The common thread in the cases where Backlash did predict a flop isn't the dislike count itself, it's that the dislike count was accompanied by evidence of a shrinking core audience, franchise fatigue, or sustained controversy stretching across many months, not a single trailer's comment section. When you see that combination, take it seriously. When you see a spike of dislikes on one trailer for a film with strong underlying tracking numbers, that's a much weaker signal, and The Odyssey currently looks like the second case, not the first. Here's the uncomfortable middle ground a lot of commentary skips over. It's possible for a casting decision to be a legitimate subject of debate and for the movie to still make $1 billion. Those two things aren't in tension, no matter how much either side of the discourse wants them to be. Studios don't need the internet's approval to hit their opening weekend targets. They need marketing reach, format exclusivity, star power, and a filmmaker with a track record that travels beyond any one platform's comment section. Nolan has all four. That also means the reverse is true. A movie can have zero visible backlash and still flop because nobody outside a small online circle ever heard of it. Dislike ratio and box office result aren't actually measuring the same thing, which is exactly why treating one as a reliable predictor of the other keeps producing wrong calls in both directions. If the dislike ratio isn't the signal, what is? 3 numbers, in order of reliability. Tracking data from the actual studios and box office analysts. Not fan polls, not social sentiment tools, but the paid tracking services that studios use to buy their own marketing. Because that's money being spent on real research, not vibes. Advanced ticket and premium format sales. When 70mm IMAX screenings sell out a year ahead of release, that's not engagement, that's a transaction. People are putting money down. That's a far stronger signal than a thumbs down button. Second weekend drop-off. This is the one that actually tells you whether the backlash had merit. A film can open huge on star power and curiosity, and still collapse in week 2 if word of mouth is bad. That's when you'll find out whether the casting debate mattered to the average moviegoer or only to the people already arguing about it online. Apply those 3 filters to any "is this going to flop" headline you see this summer, and you'll be right a lot more often than the dislike counter will. So will the Odyssey flop? Based on every actual box office indicator we have right now, tracking numbers ahead of Oppenheimer, sold-out premium formats, a filmmaker with a 15-year streak of delivering, the evidence says no. The dislike ratio is measuring something real, but it's not measuring the size of the audience that's going to show up on July 17th. We'll know for certain in a couple of weeks, and when the numbers come in, we're doing a full follow-up, breaking down exactly what happened and whether this theory held up. If you want to be here for that, subscribe now and turn on notifications. We're not waiting for the algorithm to decide you see it. Drop your own prediction in the comments. Flop, hit, or somewhere in between. See you in the next one.